Right, on to the last
Right.
one now, which is You'll Own Nothing and You'll Be Happy, the EP from Sugaar Pan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to do this one?
Yeah, man. So, it was released on the 8th of July, earlier on this year. Contains 6 songs and approximately 21 minutes and 53 seconds long. The band themselves are from Spain. They describe themselves variously on their social media page as psychedelic alchemists. Pronounced that properly this time. Who create a melting pot of krautrock, psychedelia, acid folk, and ambient post-rock. So, according to their Bandcamp website, they were founded by Alessandro Durante, aka the psychedelic, and Iker Garmendia, aka the Psychonauta. It's the band's second EP, from what I can gather, and follows the release of their first EP entitled The Five Elementi EP, which was released on the 20th of September. I think that was... I've got 2021, but that's obviously wrong. It must have been 2020. Probably worth mentioning the EP's title, i.e. You'll Own Nothing and Be Happy. I'd heard that before. I don't know if you'd heard it before.
I don't know if I have.
Yeah, so I don't know for a fact, but if you search that phrase, You'll Own Nothing, Be Happy, it may have been taken from this online video that was kind of doing its rounds earlier on in the year, which purportedly spread misinformation about the World's Economic Forum's plans to disenfranchise us from owning private property and basically ushering in a new feudalistic age by 2030. This has largely been debunked, I believe. There's articles there. I've got an article there that I can send over to you, Sneds, for the notes. But yeah, who knows what to believe. But I think it's probably connected, given that the first track in the album is called Business as Usual. But then again, that's maybe me just kind of reading too much into it. But as for that track, in terms of the music itself, I found that track immediately captivating and engaging. It had this kind of real post-punk electronic vibe to it, which, I really dug. It kind of opens with this really scratchy, clunking guitar sound, overlaid with what sounds like kind of Morse code and incoherent voice clips, which sounded kind of Chinese, maybe?
Yeah, maybe Mandarin, something like
that. Very reminiscent, for my money, of something that, public service broadcasting might have done. Don't know what you thought of it, man.
I like the use of Morse code as like a melodic hook.
Yeah, aye.
I think it's quite clever. But yeah, and then just adding sort of psychedelic guitar squeals and bleepy electronics over the top of it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And going back to the name of the EP for a second, I think it's interesting because we're living in a world of digital media.
Yeah.
You could link it with that because, you've got all these music streaming services. Okay, people still buy physical music, but everything's kind of moving more towards companies that provide a service and then you sort of rent media from them. Like, your Netflixes and your Spotifys and
Amazon Prime,
like everything. And like even, video games now, like you've got services being provided by PlayStation and Microsoft, that you stream games or you download them digitally. You don't necessarily buy physical copies of games as much anymore, and it's all moving away from that.
We pay for a game that we play on stream, me and a couple of mutual friends. We pay for a server. I can't remember how much it is. It's not a lot of money, but effectively paying for nothing. There's nothing tangible to it.
Yeah, so it is. Yeah, I think it's an interesting title. However way you look at it, whether it's a conspiracy theory or not, it is kind of the sort of age we're living in and what society is moving more and more towards. But certainly, yeah, that opening track's really interesting. Madrugada, the second track, is sort of like a bit like a 70s porno. It's got sort of those wah-wah guitars, like palm-muted wah-wah guitars. There's like a sensual flute sound in there. And it's got like tribal chanting in. It feels a bit like a drug trip as well, like on like ayahuasca or something, like some kind of powerful, like if you're out in the desert with a tribe taking some kind of powerful hallucinogen.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's definitely got that kind of ambient psychedelic feel to it. And you're right. I mean, I kind of in my notes I've pointed out like kind of ethereal noodling guitar, but then there's the pan. What I've described them as pan pipes, bongo drums, possibly a Cajun getting played. But yeah, you're right. It does have that kind of 70s feel to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's an experimental EP for sure. The next track, Solstice Mantra Part 1, that's really mysterious. It's not a word. Mysterious and sort of astral. It sounds... Again, it feels like you're sort of out in the desert, but it's like the sort of night skies lit up with stars, and it's that kind of soundscape it builds up for me.
Aye, well, I kind of the same. But kind of like what you were saying about the kind of Muddy Orb album and the second track on the Muddy Orb album, the kind of Golden Bashoka. Like, I've described the third song in this album as it's got this real cinematic vibe to it.
Yeah.
It's called Solstice Mantra. And, I've described it here as saying, like, you could almost imagine watching the sun rise over the horizon and kind of almost like bathing in the rays of the sun. That's how it felt to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you should say that because I've written it would be perfect for like a time-lapse sequence in a film or TV show. It feels like that sort of transformative from day to night kind of thing as well. So yeah, definitely agree with you on that. And the next song's got a sample from Conan the Barbarian in it.
Oh, has it?
Yeah. I mean, I actually haven't seen Conan the Barbarian, but there's that vocal sample in it. And I thought, I'll just go and search what that is. And it turns out it's James Earl Jones from Conan the Barbarian. He says something like, the strength and power of flesh. And it's got this kind of mystical, sort of oriental feel, almost ancient sounding. So I guess that kind of ties in with the sort of fantasy element of Conan the Barbarian, I suppose. But yeah, and I mean, it's a weird song. The opening vocal sample is really creepy. And then it brings those flutes in, or panpipes or whatever, and like there's a gong, there's a crashing gong sound, there's bongo drums, there's an acoustic guitar, there's sort of rasping guitars. Yeah, that's again a very interesting track, and it's called House of the Lizard as well. House of the Lizard.
Yeah, see that in and of itself, put me in mind of the Doors, because Jim Morrison called himself the Lizard King. Can't remember the name of the song, but it's like, it will come to me eventually, probably long after we finish recording. But it ends with like, I am the Lizard King, and I can do anything. And then there's just this weird sounds, crashing cymbals and stuff like that afterwards. So that just the House of the Lizard, just the title, put me in mind of the Doors. And I think you're right. It kind of felt quite dark and brooding. Track thereafter, Dolores Are My Pains, had this kind of chug, a kind of vibrating, pulsating kind of electronics that almost sounded like a steam engine kind of swelling underneath this almost kind of flamenco classical guitar accompaniment.
Yeah.
Which was quite strange as well.
It doesn't really change anything up though, like that song. It's sort of the same thing for the whole song.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It's very ponderous and sort of meditative. But I feel that one goes on a little bit too long without really doing much different for the length of it. But yeah, I think it has got some cool bits in it. And it's quite like uncomfortable at times as well. And then we may as well just talk about the last track as well then, which is Solstice Mantra Part 2. And that kind of brings back those sort of mysterious desert vibes from the first part, but it's got like a sort of slow build of like clanging guitars in the background, and it's more ominous, and there's just kind of this general background feeling of dread. Although there's like a sort of peaceful isolation in the background, there's a sort of this feeling, ominous feeling of dread. And I think the album was sort of partially inspired by the pandemic and the lockdown, and I feel like that is almost, you can imagine that is like lockdown being this kind of peaceful isolation, but with these really dark and ominous undertones as it goes on.
It's quite interesting you say that, because you kind of forget as time goes on, how lockdown affected us, and some of the things that happened and occurred over the last kind of 2 years. And Kerry, has just came back from Barcelona. She was over there with one of her pals, and she was telling me how strict Bane was while she was over there. She took her mask down over her nose to scratch her nose or something like that, and a policeman actually told her off, told her to kind of put it back up. And I remember, when COVID first hit, there was all these videos coming out of Tenerife and Malaga and all these places where it was almost like martial law had been called. They were properly locked down. It wasn't like what we had here, really. They weren't allowed to leave the house. There was police patrolling the streets. So imagine it'd be a pretty scary time.
Yeah. There's a sort of duality though, because there's that element of it, that sort of police state kind of element of it. But at the same time, there was a sort of fun, playful side to it. It's certainly at the start when people were doing all these stupid videos, doing cover songs of songs about diseases and just having lots of fun and doing stupid games and things. And there was all of this kind of, it was almost like a feeling of positivity in the beginning. We'll do this and it'll, everything will be fine. But at the same time, there was a lot of dark shit going on. And I feel that song, it has both of those feelings at the same time.
Aye. It's interesting as well, back to what you were kind of saying about the song title. It ends with this computerized voice repeating, "You'll own nothing and be happy," and then that starts kind of glitching and, getting stuck and what have you. And possibly that does tie in with what you were kind of talking about earlier on, I don't know. Yeah,
you could look really deeply into that, I think, and try and come up with all sorts of things.
I think you're right in saying, though, that, it is quite a meditative EP, quite ponderous. I think in many ways, it kind of goes back to what you were saying about Trimagi album again, where, you can listen to it and it conjures up all this imagery and you could really lose yourself in this.
Yeah. Again, I don't think this does as much as the Trimagi album did, in that it doesn't change things up quite as much over the length of some of the songs. I think some of the songs, they kind of stick to one thing and kind of do that over and over. Certainly Dolores Summer Pains is the example that I used before.
And I suppose you could say, obviously, the Solstice Mantra.
Yeah.
Both those songs don't really change all that much.
But I guess it's just building a mood and a vibe. And probably this one is definitely a more passive kind of background experience. But I think it's a weird mood. It's like an interesting balance between meditation and tension.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite interesting. How did you rate this one?
Yeah, again, about 7.
Yeah, I've gone the same for that. And just for those reasons I mentioned there, that I think sometimes it doesn't do enough for me to change things up really on some of those songs. But I think there's a lot of cool ideas and interesting kind of soundscapes that it creates. The album name is a good talking point as well. And
absolutely.
Some of the stuff on here is interesting to talk about. So yeah. Okay, so that was You'll Own Nothing and You'll Be Happy by Sugaar Pan, which is spelled with 2 A's, by the way. 朝鲜劳动党中央委员会8九贺电，回发9贺电。
Me or nothing and you will be happy. Me or nothing and you will be happy. And you will be happy.
It's not finished. It's finished.